Harlem wasn't burning with fire this time. It was burning with paper. White slips of paper, stiff and official, taped to the front doors of brownstones on 116th Street and Lenox Avenue. Eviction notices. The city called it urban renewal, a fancy phrase for a brutal reality, tearing down the heart of the neighborhood to build high-rise office spaces that no one living there could afford. Families who had lived in those apartments for 3 generations were being told they had 30 days to pack their lives into cardboard boxes and vanish. Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson stood on the corner, the collar of his coat turned up against the biting wind, watching an old woman tear one of the notices off her door. She crumbled it in her shaking hands, weeping. She didn't have anywhere to go. Bumpy knew her, Mrs. Gable. She'd baked pies for the neighborhood block parties since before the war. Now, a man in a suit downtown had decided her home was just a square on a map that needed to be erased. Bumpy didn't just run numbers. He ran Harlem. And when you run a place, you protect it. He had spent the last week pulling every string he had, bribing councilmen, threatening contractors, calling in favors from judges. But the demolition order was ironclad. It was coming from higher up than the local precinct captains he had in his pocket. It was coming from Albany. It was coming from Senator Charles Halloway. Halloway was a rising star in New York politics, a man with a smile like a shark and a war chest funded by construction tycoons. He was the architect of the demolition project. To him, Harlem wasn't a community. It was prime real estate occupied by the wrong people. "We can't shoot a senator, Bumpy," his right-hand man, Nat Pettigrew, had told him earlier that morning in the back of the apothecary. "You touch a hair on his head, the National Guard rolls down 125th Street. This ain't a turf war with Dutch Schultz. This is the government." Bumpy knew that. Violence was a hammer, and this problem was a lock that required a key. But Bumpy Johnson had never met a lock he couldn't pick. "I'm not going to shoot him," Bumpy had said, lighting a cigar. "I'm going to talk to him." That night, the talk was scheduled to happen on neutral ground, or as neutral as it got for a black man in 1960s Manhattan. A charity gala at the Waldorf Astoria. Halloway was the guest of honor. Bumpy had secured 2 tickets through a connection in the Musicians Union, costing him $5,000 he'd never see again. He turned from the window of his penthouse later that evening, watching Mamie finish her makeup in the vanity mirror. She looked regal. She wore a floor-length gown of emerald silk that shimmered like liquid money, a diamond necklace resting against her skin. She didn't look like a gangster's wife. She looked like a queen who had momentarily deigned to visit the earth. "You nervous?" Bumpy asked, adjusting his cufflinks. Mamie met his eyes in the mirror. "About walking into a room full of people who hate us?" "No. I've been black in America my whole life, Ellsworth. I know how to handle a room full of stiff necks." She paused, turning to face him. "I'm nervous about you. I see that look in your eye." "What look?" "The look that says you want to throw someone through a window." Bumpy chuckled, but it didn't reach his eyes.
"I'm just going to have a conversation, Mamie. Halloway is a businessman. Politicians are just gangsters who obey the law when people are watching. I just need to find out what his price is to leave those buildings standing."
"Everyone has a price," Mamie said, standing up and smoothing her dress. "Let's hope his is affordable." The drive to the Waldorf was silent. The city lights blurred past the windows of the Cadillac, shifting from the warm, chaotic glow of Harlem to the cold, rigid brightness of Midtown. When they pulled up to the curb, the valet stiffened. A black couple stepping out of a luxury car at the Waldorf was still a sight that caused a stutter in the rhythm of the New York elite. Bumpy stepped out first, buttoning his tuxedo jacket. He walked around the car and offered his hand to Mamie. Flashbulbs popped. Not for them, but for the movie stars and tycoons arriving behind them. But as they ascended the stairs, the crowd parted. It wasn't out of respect. It was out of confusion and a primal sense of danger. Bumpy walked with a predator's grace, a heavy, centered gravity that made the soft men in tuxedos subconsciously step aside. Inside the ballroom was a sea of white faces, crystal chandeliers, and the murmur of polite wealth. The air smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Bumpy and Mamie moved through the room like oil moving through water, distinct, separate, untouched. Eyes followed them. Whispers trailed them. Who are they? How did they get in? Is that him? Bumpy ignored it all. His eyes were scanning the room, hunting. He found his target near the orchestra pit. Senator Charles Halloway stood in a circle of admirers, holding a glass of scotch. He was a tall man, handsome in a manufactured way, with silver-streaked hair and a tan that spoke of winters in Florida. He threw his head back and laughed at something a donor said, a sound that carried over the music. "Showtime," Bumpy murmured. He placed a hand on Mamie's lower back and guided her forward. As they approached the circle, a hush fell over the group. The donor who had been speaking stopped mid-sentence. Halloway turned, his smile faltering for a microsecond before he plastered it back on. He was a politician. He knew how to handle the unexpected. "Senator Halloway," Bumpy said, his voice a low rumble that cut through the silence. "I'm Ellsworth Johnson. This is my wife, Mamie." Halloway's eyes flicked to his security detail standing a few feet away, then back to Bumpy. He knew exactly who Ellsworth Johnson was. Every power player in New York knew. "Mr. Johnson," Halloway said, his voice smooth, betraying no fear. "A surprise. I didn't see your name on the guest list." "I have friends in the musicians' union," Bumpy said, offering a tight smile. "They insisted I come. They know I have a deep interest in urban development." The tension in the circle was thick enough to choke on. The other guests were frozen, watching the collision of two very different worlds. The King of Harlem and the Prince of Albany. "Urban development," Halloway repeated, swirling his scotch. "Yes, I've heard you're a man who cares deeply about community infrastructure." "I care about the people living in it," Bumpy said. "The demolition orders on 116th Street. We need to discuss them." Halloway chuckled, a dismissive sound. "Mr. Johnson, this is a charity gala to save the whales, not a city council meeting. I'm hardly in the headspace for policy debate." "I'm not here to debate policy," Bumpy said, stepping half an inch closer. "I'm here to make a donation to your campaign, a substantial one, in exchange for a reconsideration of the zoning map. Money, the universal language." Halloway's eyes changed. The dismissal vanished, replaced by a greedy curiosity. He looked Bumpy up and down, then his eyes slid to Mamie. He looked at her longer than was polite. His gaze wasn't just appreciative, it was hungry. It lingered on her neck, the curve of her waist, the defiant set of her chin. Mamie held his gaze, her expression turning to stone. She knew men like this, men who thought their power gave them the right to consume anything beautiful in their line of sight. "A donation," Halloway said softly. "Well, I am always open to supporting my constituents' interests." He checked his watch. "I have a brief window before the keynote speech. My suite is upstairs, room 402. Why don't you and your lovely wife join me for a private drink? We can discuss the figures away from the noise. Bumpy felt a warning bell ring in the back of his mind. The invitation was standard. Backroom deals always happened in suites. But the way Halloway was looking at Mamie made Bumpy's blood run cold. Still, he thought of Mrs. Gable crying at her door. He thought of the families who would be on the street in 30 days. "We'll be there," Bumpy said. Halloway nodded, downed his drink, and walked away, his security trailing him. "I don't like him," Mamie whispered as soon as he was gone. "He looks at people like he wants to eat them." "He's a snake," Bumpy agreed. "But snakes are easier to deal with than lions. You can charm a snake. Come on, let's get this over with." They took the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. The golden doors opened onto a plush hallway that seemed miles away from the grit of the street. They found room 402. Bumpy knocked. The door was opened by one of Halloway's bodyguards, a thick-necked man who patted Bumpy down for weapons. Bumpy submitted to it, his jaw tight. He had left his piece in the car, knowing the Waldorf had security. He was unarmed. The guard stepped back, and they entered. The suite was massive, a sprawling expanse of velvet sofas, mahogany tables, and a view of the skyline that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Halloway had removed his jacket and loosened his tie. He was pouring drinks at a wet bar. "Scotch?" Halloway offered, not turning around. "No, thank you," Bumpy said. "We won't be staying long." Halloway turned, holding 2 glasses. He walked over and extended one to Mamie, ignoring Bumpy completely. "Mrs. Johnson, surely you'll join me. It's a very rare single malt, aged 20 years. Mamie looked at the glass, then at Halloway. "I don't drink with strangers, Senator." Halloway smiled, a wet, unpleasant expression. "Strangers are just friends who haven't found common ground yet." He set the glass down on the coffee table and sat on the edge of the sofa, spreading his legs in a display of arrogant comfort. "So, the building's on 116, prime location. The developers want to put up a commercial center, offices for lawyers, accountants. It will bring revenue to the city. It will put 300 families on the street," Bumpy said, remaining standing. "I'm willing to match the tax revenue the city expects for the first 2 years. In cash." Halloway laughed. "Cash? You people always think in terms of cash. It's quaint." Bumpy's hands curled into fists at his sides. "You people?" "Gangsters," Halloway said quickly, though the racial undertone hung in the air like cigar smoke. "The problem, Mr. Johnson, is that the developers have already paid me, and they paid me a lot. To stop this train, you'd have to offer me something unique, something I can't get from a checkbook." "Name your price," Bumpy said. Halloway stood up. He walked slowly toward Mamie. Bumpy stepped in front of him, blocking his path. Halloway stopped, inches from Bumpy's chest. But he craned his neck to look around him at Mamie. "I have money," Halloway said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I have power. I have the mayor on speed dial. What I don't have is a thrill. I'm bored, Mr. Johnson. Politics is boring. Winning is boring." He looked Bumpy in the eye. "You want to save your little neighborhood? You want those old ladies to keep their apartments?" Halloway gestured to the bedroom door, which was slightly ajar. "I want one night with her." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. Bumpy stared at him. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe. For a second, he couldn't process the words. It was such a violation, such a grotesque absurdity, that his brain rejected it. "Excuse me," Bumpy said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "You heard me," Halloway said, his confidence bordering on insanity. He was drunk on his own invincibility. I've always been curious. I've heard stories about the passion of your people. I want to experience it. One night, she stays here, you go. In the morning, I call the mayor and cancel the demolition. The buildings stay up forever. Mamie made a sound, a sharp intake of breath, like she had been slapped. Bumpy felt a red haze creep into the edges of his vision. The rage was different from anything he had felt before. It wasn't the hot anger of a street fight. It was a cold, absolute resolve to end a life. But his mind was racing. If I kill him here, now, with his guards outside, we both die. Or we go to the chair, and the buildings still come down. You must have lost your mind, Bumpy whispered. You think my wife is for sale? Everything is for sale, Halloway said with a smirk. That's capitalism, isn't it? You sell heroin, I sell legislation. We're both businessmen. Don't act righteous with me, boy. It's a transaction. Her body for 300 homes. That's a noble sacrifice, isn't it? Bumpy moved. He grabbed Halloway by the throat. It happened so fast, Halloway didn't even have time to gasp. Bumpy slammed him back against the wall, lifting him off his feet. The senator's eyes bulged, his hands clawing at Bumpy's wrist. Ellsworth! Mamie screamed. Don't! Bumpy's thumb dug into Halloway's windpipe. He could feel the pulse fluttering there, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. He wanted to crush it. He wanted to squeeze until the light went out. I should tear your head off, Bumpy snarled, his face inches from Halloway's turning purple face. You think because you have a title you can speak to us like dogs? Ellsworth, the guards. Mamie was pulling at his other arm. If you kill him, we don't leave this room. Think. Bumpy's chest heaved. He looked at Halloway, gasping and turning blue. He looked at Mamie, terrified but clear-eyed. She was right. The bodyguards outside were armed. If there was a struggle, shots fired, Bumpy and Mamie would be dead before they hit the hallway carpet. And the news would report that a crazed black gangster attacked a senator. The narrative would be written in blood, and Harlem would pay the price. With a growl of frustration, Bumpy released his grip. Halloway dropped to the floor, coughing and hacking, clutching his throat. We're leaving, Bumpy said, grabbing Mamie's hand. Now. He pulled her toward the door. Halloway, on his hands and knees, wheezed, sucking in air. As they reached the door, Halloway's voice croaked out, raspy and desperate. Wait! Bumpy stopped, his hand on the doorknob. He didn't turn around. You're walking away from the deal, Halloway wheezed. He scrambled to his feet, holding onto the sofa for support. His fear had been replaced by a twisted, desperate anger. He couldn't believe he had been touched. He couldn't believe he had been denied. You think you can just walk out on me? I can have those buildings bulldozed tomorrow. Bumpy turned slowly. Burn them down for all I care. We're done. Money! Halloway shouted. He ran to a desk in the corner and unlocked a drawer. He pulled out a thick stack of cash, banded in bank straps. It's not enough. You want money too? Here. He threw the stack of bills onto the coffee table. It hit with a heavy thud. That's $50,000, Halloway panted. He pulled out another stack. 75. 100. He threw a second brick of cash. $100,000! Halloway screamed, his face red and sweaty, his hair disheveled. I will pay you $100,000 right now to leave her here. Look at it. That's more money than you've ever seen in your life, boy. Take it. Sell her to me. The air in the room seemed to shatter. For Bumpy, the world slowed down. He looked at the pile of green on the table. $100,000. In 1960, that was a fortune. It was enough to buy a mansion, a business, a new life. And this man, this elected official, this pillar of society, was offering it to buy a human being, specifically his wife. It was the ultimate insult. It was the reduction of Mamie's entire existence, her soul, her dignity, to a commodity. It was slavery with a fresh coat of paint. Bumpy let go of Mamie's hand. "Ellsworth," Mamie whispered, her voice trembling. "Let's just go." Bumpy didn't hear her. He walked back into the room. Halloway smiled, thinking he had won, thinking the money had done what the threat couldn't. "That's it," Halloway panted, wiping his mouth. "Smart man. Every man has a price. Just leave her. Take the cash and go." Bumpy stopped at the coffee table. He looked down at the money. Then he looked up at Halloway. "You think," Bumpy said, his voice devoid of all emotion, "that because I'm a criminal, I have no code? You think because I'm black, I have no soul? I think you like money," Halloway sneered. "Now get out." Bumpy reached into his tuxedo jacket. He didn't have his normal piece. But Bumpy Johnson never walked anywhere completely naked. Tucked into the inner lining of his cummerbund was a small, pearl-handled Derringer. 2 shots, .22 caliber. Not a war weapon, but at this range, it was lethal. He drew it in a blur of motion. Halloway's eyes went wide. He opened his mouth to scream for the guards. Bumpy lunged across the table, kicking the money aside. He grabbed Halloway by his expensive tie and jammed the barrel of the small gun under the senator's chin. "Make a sound," Bumpy hissed, "and I paint the ceiling with your brains." Halloway froze. A whimper escaped his throat, but he clamped his mouth shut. He could feel the cold metal digging into his soft skin. He smelled the gun oil and the faint scent of Bumpy's cologne. "You offered me money for my wife," Bumpy whispered, leaning in so close their foreheads touched. "You tried to buy her like she was a car, like she was cattle." "Please," Halloway squeaked. I was drunk. I didn't mean—" "You meant every word," Bumpy said. "You're a sick man, Senator, a disease, and usually I cut diseases out." Bumpy's finger tightened on the trigger. The hammer began to pull back. Halloway squeezed his eyes shut, tears leaking out. He began to shake uncontrollably. Urine darkened the front of his gray trousers. "Ellsworth!" Mamie was at his side again, her hand on his shoulder. "Look at him. He's pathetic. He peed himself. Don't throw your life away for a stain like him." Bumpy looked at the senator, shivering and sobbing, reeking of fear and urine. Mamie was right. Killing him now would be a mercy, living with the knowledge that he had begged and soiled himself in front of the man he tried to humiliate. That was a different kind of punishment, but it wasn't enough. Bumpy lowered the hammer. He didn't holster the gun. He kept it pressed to Halloway's cheek. "I'm not going to kill you tonight," Bumpy said, "because you're not worth the electric chair. But you listen to me." He slapped Halloway across the face with the pistol, a sharp crack that split the senator's lip. Halloway cried out, stifling the sound with his hand. "You keep your mouth shut about this," Bumpy said. "If you send the police, if you send the feds, I will tell every newspaper in this city that Senator Halloway offered $100,000 to sleep with a gangster's wife. I'll ruin you. Understand?" Halloway nodded frantically, blood dripping down his chin. "And as for the buildings," Bumpy said, stepping back, "we're not done. I'm going to stop you, and I'm going to do it without firing a shot. I'm going to make you wish You had never heard the name Johnson. Bumpy spat on the pile of money on the floor. Let's go, Mamie. He holstered the small gun, straightened his jacket, and grabbed his wife's hand. They walked out of the room, past the oblivious guards in the hallway. The guard looked at Bumpy, saw the darkness in his face, and decided not to ask why they were leaving so soon. They didn't speak in the elevator. They didn't speak as they walked through the lobby, past the glitz and the glamour that now felt like a thin veneer over a rotting carcass. They got into the car, and the valet shut the door. As the car pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic of Park Avenue, Mamie finally let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for 20 minutes. She began to shake. Bumpy reached over and took her hand. His grip was gentle, a stark contrast to the violence in the hotel room. "I'm sorry," Bumpy said, his voice rough. "I should never have taken you there. I didn't know he was like that." Mamie squeezed his hand. "You didn't take the money." Bumpy looked at her, offended. "Did you think I would?" "No," Mamie said softly. "But $100,000. A lot of men would have hesitated. You didn't even blink." She lifted his hand to her lips and kissed his knuckles. "You're a good man, Ellsworth. Underneath it all." Bumpy looked out the window at the city passing by. "I'm not a good man, Mamie. A good man would have killed him for disrespecting you." "A smart man keeps us alive," she said. "But what do we do now? He's going to tear those buildings down just to spite you. He's going to hurt those people because you made him look weak." "He thinks he's untouchable," Bumpy said, his eyes narrowing as he watched the streetlights flicker. "He thinks because he has the law on his side, he's safe. He thinks money can buy anything." Bumpy reached into his pocket and pulled out a matchbook he had swiped from the senator's coffee table. It had a phone number scrawled on the inside cover, likely a direct line. "He tried to use money to destroy my family," Bumpy said quietly. "So I'm going to use money to destroy his." "How?" Mamie asked. Bumpy turned to her, a cold, calculating smile forming on his lips. It was the smile that had made him the boss of Harlem. "Every man has a weakness," Bumpy said. "Halloway's weakness is that he thinks everyone is as disloyal as he is. He's married, isn't he?" "Yes," Mamie said. "Margaret Halloway. She's a socialite. Old money." "Old money usually means old secrets," Bumpy mused. "And wives usually know where the skeletons are buried, especially wives who are ignored by husbands who chase thrill in hotel rooms." Bumpy tapped on the partition glass. The driver looked back. "Change of plans, Junebug," Bumpy said. "Take us to Small's Paradise. I need to make a phone call to Pettigrew. Tell him to get the boys ready. We're going hunting." "Hunting for who, boss?" the driver asked. "For Mrs. Halloway," Bumpy said. "I hear she likes the opera, and I think it's time we became patrons of the arts." The car swung a U-turn, heading back uptown. The demolition was still scheduled. The clock was ticking. But Bumpy Johnson had found the loose thread in the senator's expensive suit, and he was going to pull it until the whole thing unraveled. Part 1 ended with the promise of war. Not a war of guns, but a war of secrets. Halloway had offered $100,000 for Mamie. Bumpy was about to find out how much it cost to buy the soul of a senator's wife. And unlike Halloway, Bumpy wasn't looking for a night of pleasure. He was looking for ammunition. The demolition crews were like vultures. They didn't strike all at once. They circled first. The morning after the incident at the Waldorf, Bumpy Johnson stood on the roof of the sprawling apartment complex on 116th Street. He watched through a pair of binoculars as a surveyor's van idled down the block. Men in hard hats were pointing at the brownstones, making notes on clipboards, laughing about something. They looked like they were already counting their bonuses. To them, The brick and mortar below wasn't a home to hundreds of families. It was just debris waiting to be cleared for Halloway's gleaming new commercial center. "They're getting bold, Bumpy," Nat Pettigrew said, standing behind him, lighting a cigarette against the wind. "Surveyors today, bulldozers next week. The word on the street is the police captain has orders to clear the block by force if the tenants don't move." Bumpy lowered the binoculars. His face was a mask of stone, but inside, the fire from the hotel room was still burning. He could still smell the senator's expensive cologne, could still feel the trembling of the man's jaw against the barrel of his gun. But violence wouldn't stop a bulldozer. You shoot a driver, they hire another one. You blow up a crane, insurance buys a bigger one. "We need the leverage, Nat," Bumpy said, turning away from the ledge. "Did you find her?" Nat exhaled a cloud of gray smoke. Margaret Halloway, 42 years old. Old money from Connecticut. Her daddy made a fortune in railroads. She married Charles 10 years ago. From what the maids tell my cousin who works at their townhouse on the Upper East Side, it ain't exactly a fairy tale. "Talk to me," Bumpy said, walking toward the roof access door. "The senator sleeps in the guest room. Or, more accurately, he sleeps in hotels with women who charge by the hour. Margaret spends her days shopping and her nights drinking expensive wine alone. She's a prop, Bumpy. He trots her out for elections and galas, puts her in a nice dress, and then puts her back in the box when the cameras are off." Nat paused, tapping ash onto the roof. "And there's something else. My cousin says Halloway has a ledger, a blue book. He writes in it late at night in his study, then hides it in a wall safe behind a painting of a ship. He guards it like it's his own heart." Bumpy smiled, but it was a cold, predatory thing. "A neglected wife is a dangerous thing, Nat. She's sitting on a powder keg of resentment. All she needs is someone to light the fuse." "And you're the match?" "No," Bumpy said. "I'm the buyer. Halloway wanted to buy my wife for pleasure. I'm going to buy his wife for business." "It's risky, Bumpy. You approach a senator's wife. If she screams, if she calls the cops..." "She won't scream," Bumpy said confidently. "Women like that don't scream. They suffer in silence until someone offers them a way out. Where is she tonight?" Nat checked a small notepad. "Thursday. Every Thursday night, the senator has his poker game, which we know is just code for him visiting the Velvet Room. While he's doing that, Mrs. Halloway goes to the Metropolitan Opera, alone. She has a private box." "The opera," Bumpy mused. "Classy. Get the car, Nat, and stop by the safe. I need $50,000 in small bills." Nat's eyes widened. 50 grand? Boss, that's half the reserve." "Investment capital, Nat," Bumpy said, buttoning his coat. "We're buying a senator's soul. That doesn't come cheap." The Metropolitan Opera House was a cathedral of gold leaf and red velvet, a place where the city's elite went to be seen rather than to listen. Bumpy Johnson walked through the heavy brass doors, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than the car parked outside. He moved with a quiet, lethal elegance. He wasn't supposed to be there. Segregation was technically over, but the invisible lines of New York were drawn in steel. But Bumpy had a way of making people look away. He projected an aura that said, "Do not ask me for a ticket. Do not ask me my business." He didn't go to the main seating area. He moved up the sweeping staircase to the box seats. The usher, a young man with a pimply face, stepped forward to block him, then saw the look in Bumpy's eye and the crisp $100 bill that appeared in Bumpy's hand. The usher vanished, as if by magic. Bumpy walked down the carpeted corridor, counting the numbers on the mahogany doors. Box 14. He paused outside the door. He could hear the soaring soprano voice from the stage, singing of tragedy and betrayal. La Traviata. Fitting. He turned the handle and slipped inside. The box was a small, private room overlooking the stage. It was dark, illuminated only by the glow from the performance below. Margaret Halloway sat in a velvet chair, her back to him. She was wearing pearls and a dress of midnight blue. She was holding opera glasses, but she wasn't looking at the stage. She was looking down at her hands, which were twisting a silk handkerchief into knots. She sensed him before she saw him. She stiffened, turning her head sharply. "Charles?" she whispered, her voice laced with a mixture of hope and dread. "No, Mrs. Halloway," Bumpy said, his voice a low baritone that blended with the music. "Charles is busy tonight. I believe the game is 5-card stud at the Velvet Room." Margaret stood up, knocking her purse over. "Who are you? How did you get in here? I'll call security." "You could," Bumpy said, staying in the shadows near the door. He held up his hands, showing he was empty-handed. "But then we wouldn't have the conversation you've been waiting 10 years to have." She paused, her hand hovering near the call button on the wall. "What conversation?" Bumpy stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch the sharp angles of his face. "The one where someone finally asks you what you want. The one where someone acknowledges that being the wife of Senator Charles Halloway is a prison sentence, not a privilege." Margaret stared at him. She was a beautiful woman, but her face was etched with the subtle lines of a deep, eroding unhappiness. She looked at Bumpy, seeing a black man in a tuxedo in her private box, and her instincts warred with her curiosity. "You're him," she whispered. "The gangster, Johnson. I saw your picture in the paper last year." "I'm a businessman, Mrs. Halloway, just like your husband, though I like to think I have better manners." Bumpy gestured to the empty chair beside her. "May I?" Margaret hesitated, then slowly lowered her hand from the call button. "If you were going to kill me, you would have done it already." "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to offer you a job." Bumpy sat down. He didn't look at her. He looked at the stage, where a woman in a white dress was dying beautifully. "My husband is trying to destroy my neighborhood," Bumpy said quietly. "He's tearing down homes to build offices. He's doing it for money, of course. But you know that. You know exactly what kind of man he is." "I don't know anything about his business," Margaret said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Don't you?" Bumpy turned his head, locking eyes with her. "You live in his house. You see who calls late at night. You see the envelopes that come in and don't go into the bank account. You see the lipstick on his collar when he comes home from his poker games. You know he's corrupt, Margaret. And I think you hate him for it." Margaret looked away, her jaw tightening. "You have no right to speak to me about my marriage." "He tried to buy my wife," Bumpy said. The words hung in the air, heavier than the music. Margaret turned back to him, her eyes wide. "What?" "Last night, at the Waldorf, I went to him to discuss the demolition. He told me he'd save the buildings if I gave him my wife for the night. Then he offered me $100,000 cash to leave her there." Margaret's face went pale. She slumped back into her chair, the fight draining out of her. She didn't call him a liar. She didn't defend her husband. She just closed her eyes, and a single bitter tear escaped. "That sounds like Charles," she whispered. "He thinks he owns the world. He thinks people are just things." "He disrespected my wife," Bumpy said, his voice hardening. "And he disrespected you. Every time he chases a skirt, every time he uses your family name to cover his dirty deals, he's laughing at you. He thinks you're too weak to do anything about it. He thinks you're just the little woman at home, waiting for scraps of affection. Margaret opened her eyes. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. It was the same anger Bumpy had seen in Mamie's eyes. "What do you want, Mr. Johnson?" Bumpy reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the velvet railing of the box. "I want to make a purchase," Bumpy said. "Your husband tried to buy my wife's body. I want to buy your husband's secrets." Margaret looked at the envelope. "What is that?" $50,000. Cash. Untraceable. She laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You think I need money? My family built railroads, Mr. Johnson. I have more money than God." "You have family money," Bumpy corrected her, "controlled by trusts, managed by your husband." "Do you have freedom money? Do you have leave him and start over in Paris money? Do you have money that Charles can't touch, can't track, and can't take back?" Margaret went silent. He had struck a nerve. "I don't want you to kill him," Bumpy said. "I don't want you to hurt him. I just want the ledger, the blue book, the one he keeps in the wall safe behind the painting in his study, the one that lists the kickbacks from the construction companies." Margaret stared at him. "How do you know about the blue book?" "I make it my business to know things," Bumpy said. "He's going to tear down my home, Margaret. I'm going to stop him. With that book, I own him. I can force him to cancel the demolition. And I can humiliate him." He leaned in closer. "Think about it. He tried to buy a night with another woman. Why not sell him out? It's poetic justice. You sell his secrets, you take the cash, and you watch him squirm. It's the only way you'll ever get even." Margaret looked at the envelope, then at the stage, then at Bumpy. Her hands stopped twisting the handkerchief. "He keeps the combination in his head," she said softly. "But he writes things down when he's drunk. He thinks I'm stupid. He thinks I don't notice the numbers he scribbles on the back of his matchbooks." "Get me the book," Bumpy said, "and the 50,000 is yours. Plus, I guarantee his ruin. I guarantee he will never humiliate you again." Margaret reached out and placed her hand on the envelope. Her fingers were trembling, not with fear, but with adrenaline. It was the first act of rebellion she had committed in 10 years. "I can't bring it to you," she said. "He has guards at the house. If I leave with a briefcase, they'll check it." "I'll come to you," Bumpy said, "tomorrow night. He has a fundraiser in Albany. He'll be gone overnight." "No," Margaret said. "The guards stay at the house even when he's gone. To watch me. He's paranoid." She thought for a moment. "The gardener. Tuesday mornings, the service entrance is open for deliveries. I can hide it in the greenhouse, under the potting bench." "Done," Bumpy said. He stood up. "Tuesday morning. My man will pick it up." He turned to leave, but Margaret spoke again. "Mr. Johnson?" Bumpy paused. "Yes?" "Make him hurt," she said. Her voice was ice cold. "Make him beg, like he tried to make you beg." Bumpy tipped his head. "Mrs. Halloway, it will be my pleasure." The weekend passed in a blur of agonizing tension. The surveyors were back on 116th Street, this time painting red X's on the doors of the buildings slated for demolition. The neighborhood was on edge. A protest had formed on Lenox Avenue, but the police had broken it up with batons and dogs. Bumpy stayed in the shadows, telling his lieutenants to hold back. Wait. Wait for the book. Tuesday morning arrived with a gray drizzle that slicked the streets of Manhattan. Nat Pettigrew drove the delivery van. He was dressed in blue coveralls with "City Florist" stitched on the pocket. Bumpy sat in the back, concealed behind crates of hydrangeas. They pulled up to the service entrance of the Halloway townhouse on the Upper East Side. It was a fortress of limestone and iron gates. "Easy does it, Nat," Bumpy whispered. "Just a delivery. You're dropping off orchids for the solarium." Nat nodded, sweating slightly. He grabbed a crate of flowers and walked to the gate. The guard checked his clipboard, patted him down lazily, and buzzed him in. Bumpy watched through a crack in the rear doors. Minutes stretched into hours. Every second felt like a potential trap. Had Margaret flipped? Had she told her husband? Was this a setup? 10 minutes later, Nat walked back out. He was empty-handed. No, wait. He was carrying a small burlap sack used for soil. He tossed it into the back of the van and jumped into the driver's seat. "Go," Bumpy commanded. The van pulled away, merging into traffic. As soon as they were clear of the block, Bumpy ripped open the burlap sack. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a leather-bound ledger. It was blue. Bumpy opened it, but it was worse than Bumpy had hoped. Halloway wasn't just taking bribes. He was laundering money for the Italian mob. There were names in here that Bumpy recognized, names that ended in vowels and carried death sentences. The Genovese family. Halloway was taking money from the Italians to push the demolition through, likely so the mob could get the construction contracts and pour concrete. "Jackpot," Bumpy whispered. "What is it, boss?" Nat asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "This isn't just leverage, Nat. This is a nuke. Halloway is in bed with the Genovese. If the feds see this, he goes to prison for 20 years. If the Genovese find out he kept a record of their business, he goes in a hole in the Meadowlands." Bumpy closed the book. A savage satisfaction settled in his chest. Halloway had tried to buy Mamie with dirty money. Now, Bumpy held the receipt for that dirt. "Take us to the bank," Bumpy said. "I need to make a withdrawal for Mrs. Halloway. She earned every penny." Later that afternoon, Bumpy sat in the back of Small's Paradise. It was closed, the chairs stacked on tables. The only light came from the bar where Mamie was pouring 2 drinks. She walked over and set a whiskey down in front of him. "You got it?" she asked. Bumpy tapped the blue book sitting on the table. "I got it." "And the senator's wife?" "She came through. Nat dropped the money in a locker at Grand Central Station, just like she asked. She's booking a flight to Paris on Friday." Mamie sat down across from him. She looked at the book, then at Bumpy. "So, you own him now?" "I own his past, his present, and his future," Bumpy said. He took a sip of the whiskey. "I'm going to make the call tonight. I want a meeting." "Be careful, Ellsworth," Mamie said. "When you corner a rat, it bites. Especially a rat with friends in the mob." "He won't bite," Bumpy said calmly, "because he knows I have the teeth. But I'm not just going to stop the demolition, Mamie. That's not enough." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make him apologize." Mamie raised an eyebrow. "An apology? From a man like that? He'd rather die." "Exactly," Bumpy said. "That's why it's going to hurt so much. He wanted to degrade you. He wanted to bring you low. So I'm going to bring him lower. I don't want his life. I want his pride. I want him on his knees in this room, begging for your forgiveness." "He'll never do it," Mamie said. "For this book?" Bumpy patted the leather cover. "He'll do a tap dance if I ask him to. This book is his life. Without it, he's dead. The Italians will kill him before the feds even get cuffs on him." Bumpy stood up. "Get dressed, Mamie. Wear something nice. Tonight, the senator is coming to Harlem, and this time, he's playing by our rules." Senator Charles Halloway was having a bad week, but he assumed it was about to get better. He sat in his study, nursing a drink, looking at the architectural blueprints for the new Halloway Plaza. It was going to be his legacy. A shining tower of glass and steel in the middle of the slum. The phone rang. He picked it up. Halloway, Senator. Bumpy Johnson's voice came through the line, clear and terrifyingly calm. I think you lost something. Halloway stiffened. Johnson, if you're calling to threaten me again, save your breath. The bulldozers roll on Monday. My security has been doubled. You can't get near me. I don't need to get near you, Bumpy said. I'm looking at your ledger, Charles. The blue one. Page 42. Donation from VG. That wouldn't be Vito Genovese, would it? Halloway dropped his glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, scotch splashing everywhere. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt dizzy. That's impossible, Halloway stammered. That book is in my safe. Is it? Bumpy asked. Check. Halloway dropped the phone, leaving it dangling by the cord. He ran to the painting of the ship on the wall, tore it aside, and spun the dial on the safe. He wrenched it open. Empty. Halloway screamed. It was a guttural, animal sound of pure terror. He frantically felt around the empty metal box, as if the book might be invisible. It was gone. Margaret. It had to be. She was the only one who was home all day. He ran back to the phone. Johnson, listen to me. You don't know what you have. If you release that, I know exactly what I have, Bumpy interrupted. I have your head on a platter. The feds get this, you rot in a cell. The Italians get this. Well, they don't like people writing down their business. They'll cut you into pieces small enough to fit in an ashtray. What do you want? Halloway begged, dropping to his knees. Money? I'll give you the 100,000. I'll give you double, 200,000. I don't want your money, Charles. I spent 50 grand of my own just to buy that book from your wife. Best investment I ever made. Halloway choked. My wife? She's gone, Charles. She sold you out. And frankly, she gave me a discount. What do you want? Halloway screamed into the receiver. I want a meeting, Bumpy said. Tonight, in Harlem. Small's Paradise on 135th. Come alone. If I see a bodyguard, if I see a cop, copies of this book go to the New York Times and to Fat Tony Salerno. Do you understand? I understand. And Charles? Yes? Bring your knees. You're going to need them. The line went dead. Halloway stepped out. He was wearing a trench coat over his suit, his hat pulled low. He felt eyes on him from every corner. He felt the weight of the city pressing down on him. He hurried to the door of the club and pushed it open. Inside, it was dark. The air smelled of stale smoke and floor wax. A single spotlight illuminated a table in the center of the dance floor. Bumpy Johnson sat there. He was smoking a cigar, the blue book resting casually under his hand. Next to him sat Mamie. She looked radiant, terrifyingly beautiful, watching Halloway with an expression of cool detachment. Halloway walked toward them, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall. He stopped 10 feet away. Johnson? Halloway said, his voice trembling. I'm here. So you are, Bumpy said. He didn't stand up. You look tired, Senator. Give me the book, Halloway said, trying to summon a shred of authority. I'll cancel the demolition. I'll sign the order tonight. Just give me the book. We'll get to the demolition, Bumpy said. He took a drag of the cigar and blew the smoke toward Halloway. But first, there's a matter of disrespect. Bumpy pointed to the floor in front of Mamie. You came into my life and treated my wife like a whore, Bumpy said calmly. You offered me money to debase her. You thought you were a king and we were peasants. Halloway swallowed hard. I apologized on the phone. Not good enough, Bumpy said. I want you to apologize to her. Now. And I want you to do it properly." Halloway looked at Mamie. He looked at the floor. The humiliation clawed at his throat. He was a United States senator. He was a white man of power and influence. Kneeling before a gangster's wife in a Harlem jazz club was a death of the ego so profound he felt like vomiting. "I can't," Halloway whispered. Bumpy picked up the book. "Fat Tony Salerno lives in Brooklyn. I can have a messenger there in 20 minutes. He really hates rats, Charles." Halloway made a noise like a wounded animal. He looked at the book, his life, his freedom, his safety. Then he looked at Bumpy's implacable face. Slowly, agonizingly, Senator Charles Halloway lowered himself. One knee hit the dusty floor, then the other. He bowed his head. "Say it," Bumpy commanded. "Mrs. Johnson," Halloway whispered to the floorboards. "I apologize." "I can't hear you," Mamie said. Her voice was sharp, cutting. Halloway squeezed his eyes shut. "Mrs. Johnson, I apologize. I was wrong. I disrespected you, and I am sorry." "Look at her," Bumpy snapped. Halloway looked up. Tears of rage and shame were streaming down his face. He looked into Mamie's eyes. "I am sorry," he choked out. "Please, forgive me." Mamie held his gaze for a long moment. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just looked at him with pity. "You are a small man, Senator," she said softly. "Get up. You're staining the floor." Halloway scrambled to his feet, wiping his face. "The book," he gasped. "Please, the book." Bumpy stood up. He picked up the ledger. "The demolition stops," Bumpy said. "Permanently. You declare the block a historic landmark. You put it in writing tomorrow morning." "Yes," Halloway said. "Yes, I will. I swear." "And," Bumpy continued, "you resign from the zoning committee, citing health reasons. I don't want you anywhere near Harlem ever again." "Done," Halloway said. "Just give it to me." Bumpy looked at the book. Then he looked at Halloway. "You know, Charles," Bumpy said, "if I give you this book, you might just burn it and come after us again next week." "No, I won't. I swear." "I don't trust you," Bumpy said. "So here is the deal. I'm going to keep the book." Halloway's eyes went wide. "What? No, that wasn't the deal." "The deal is you stay alive," Bumpy said, his voice dropping to a growl. "I keep the book in a safe deposit box. As long as the buildings stand, and as long as you stay out of my way, the book stays in the dark. But if I see one brick fall on 116th Street, if I see one police car harassing my people, if I even dream that you are thinking about revenge, copies go to the feds and the mob." Bumpy walked up to Halloway and shoved the cigar into the senator's breast pocket, burning the silk. "I own you, Charles. You work for me now. Get out of my club." Halloway stood there, broken. He realized with dawning horror that Bumpy was right. He wasn't free. He was a puppet. And Bumpy Johnson held the strings. Forever. He turned and ran. He ran out of the club, into the Harlem night, fleeing the consequences of his own greed. Bumpy watched him go, then turned to Mamie. "You okay?" he asked. Mamie smoothed her dress. She walked over to Bumpy and kissed him on the cheek. "I'm fine," she said. He looked good on his knees. Bumpy chuckled. He tossed the blue book onto the table. "Yes, he did." "So," Mamie said, pouring herself another drink, "you bought his wife, you stole his secrets, and you saved the neighborhood. Not bad for a week's work." "Just business, Mamie," Bumpy said, looking toward the door where the senator had fled. "Just business." Outside, the rain began to fall again, washing the streets clean. The demolition notices on 116th Street would be gone by morning. The families would sleep safe. And somewhere in the dark, a senator was realizing that money couldn't buy everything, but leverage could buy a kingdom.